other day, when we were together, it was said that when we take flour and yeast and water and we mix them together, we need to add sugar to be a catalyzing force, to bring them together. And so 3 stories were told that were said to represent these 3 elements: the flour, the yeast, and the water. And the question was asked, what is this sugar that we bring to whatever experience, whatever stories or story that comes to us, to bring it together in us so that it becomes the wisdom that we can impart and claim for ourselves. So there is an old story that could be said to contain these 3, or what represent these 3, the flour, the yeast, and the water, in the sense of the story containing the characters, the archetypes, and the sacred symbols or sacred numbers that could represent the flour, the yeast, and the water, and perhaps might allow us to recognize what is this sugar that we bring to every experience, every story, or all stories. It's the story of a king and queen who had a daughter, who it was recognized from a very early age was very special. Unlike other princesses, she did not like to buy gowns and wear jewels. She wanted knowledge. And so, at her behest, she learned mathematics. She was taught philosophy. She loved astronomy. And her particular interest was the stars. So she became fascinated with the way of astrology. But she, in her quest, recognizing that there was a secret in the stars, wanted avidly to learn what this secret was. So her father, the king, cast around in the kingdom for someone who might be able to provide this secret. And indeed an old hermit sage was found. And he was invited to the palace, using a little carrot, so to speak, saying that the king would give him the latest thing that had been discovered, which was a telescope that would bring the stars close to him. So the sage hermit came to the palace, but he told the king and queen that this knowledge could only be imparted 1 to 1, so that he would have to be alone with the princess, and this was agreed to. So, in the course of their time together, the old sage imparted to the princess the secret of the stars, and she was fascinated, ever looking upward to look at the constellations and read them, using this secret that she had learned from the sage. But one time she was looking up at the stars and reading them, when she learned that there was a mountain that contained a wealth, a treasure that was beyond anyone's imagining. And she wanted to find that mountain. So again she asked her father to call on the great sage hermit. And again he came, and he said, yes, indeed, there is such a mountain, and we can go there. But it is only available to us at midnight when the moon is full. And as it so happened, it was that very day. So, taking the princess's hand, they made their way to this mountain. And as the moon full above their heads and midnight arrived, the old sage intoned a chant, and there was a rumble, and the mountain opened, and they entered, and before the princess's eyes was a treasure beyond any imagining. Her eyes darted from here to here, to there, and she became completely absorbed in trying to take in what it was that constituted the treasure of that mountain, a feast for her senses. But then the hermit said, be careful. The opening is only there for 1/2 an hour. We must be alert, else the mountain will close and we will be trapped inside. Now as the princess gazed around, her eyes lit on a golden shell, and knowing the ways of shells, she put it up to her ear, and she found that she could hear not only the sounds of the universal spheres, but she could tune into any conversation. Microcosm and macrocosm brought together in a shell, a golden shell. But the old hermit was alert, and he said, beware, we have to leave, the mountain will close. And sure enough, they left, and there was the rumble, and the mountain closed behind them. The princess went back to her palace and could not forget what she had seen, and she longed for that golden shell. So at the first opportunity, when the full moon was nigh, she set out again. When she arrived at the mountain, she had memorized the chant of the old hermit, and as she intoned it, the mountain opened and she entered. Immediately she went to where she had seen the golden shell and placed it to her ear. And as she turned it, tuning in, she could hear the conversations of her dear mother and father, bewailing the fact that she had left them, even for one night. And then time passed, and suddenly she realized that it was nigh on the 30 minutes, and she dashed to the opening, but it was too late. The mountain closed, and she was locked within. She listened to her golden shell. She remembered the chant, but it did not work from the inside. Of course, the days passed, and not only were the parents worried for one night, But where was their princess? How could she be found? Well, of course, it was learned that she was enclosed in the mountain. So soldiers were sent, workmen, to dig, but their shovels, their picks and their axes broke on the side of that great mountain. What could be done? People came. They knowing that the princess was encaved within, but they could do nothing. But as it happened, there was a young man, the son of a wood chopper, who helped his father gather wood and take it to the town to sell, to make their livelihood. Carrying a load of wood to the village, happened to hear of the plight of the princess, and in his heart he wished that he could help to free her. But as he was walking down the streets after selling his wood, there was an old woman selling an old wood, an instrument like a lute that has 7 strings. The young man was drawn to the old woman. The wood of the oud was beautiful, even though the strings were missing. So he asked the old woman, "How much do you want for this instrument?" Taking out of his pocket the 3 coins that he had. And she said, I'll take them. So for the 3 coins, the young man bought the stringless instrument. But as he was leaving, the old woman went over to him, whispered in his ear, "You know that this is a magic instrument, and if it is strung with gold, it reveals its magic." The young man took the oud, but he had no means to find the gold with which he could string it. But then he felt impelled, even though he thought himself powerless, to go to the mountain in which the princess was encaved. All the people who gathered there during the day left there at night, but the young man stayed. And as the night began to fall, something glistened in the bush nearby. It was a thread, a golden thread, from the garment of the princess that had been caught on the branch as she entered the mountain. When he took the golden thread, he thought to himself, "What if I string my instrument with this gold thread?" And it was just enough to make 7 strings. He strung the oud, and as it so happened, it was full moon. And he plucked a string, and it made a resonating sound like a human voice. And again, the oud intoned the chant and the rumbling of the mountain opened. The princess flew out of the cave within and embraced the young man with thanks. She took with her her shell of gold. They went back to the palace, of course, to great rejoicing, and we know the end of the story. They married, and with the musical instrument strung with gold, and the golden shell, they ruled a kingdom that prospered and grew, flourished in harmony and wealth. This story, containing as it does what we could say represents the flour, the yeast, and the water. It can be asked again, what is the sugar? What is it that we have that takes any experience or series of experiences, at whatever level it might be, to homogenize within us and create an understanding, a knowing, a realization that becomes the wisdom with which we can impart to life. What is it that brings the characters, the archetypes, the sacred symbols and numbers that are contained in every experience, and bring it to wisdom in us? The sugar. What is our sugar? What is it that we have that turns every experience into the bread that we can feed life?